Tony Stark and Steve Rogers are the heart of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is their final conversation as friends. Steve has just been brought in for violating the Sokovia Accords in his attempt to save Bucky from both police and the Black Panther. Tony's frustrated, but he earnestly wants to fix things here. He doesn't want anything bad to happen to his friend, and deep down, he suspects that Steve might just be right. In an uncharacteristic move that reveals just how hard he's trying, Tony leads with naked vulnerability, a peace offering hearkening to Steve's past, and forthright honesty regarding his romantic failings with Pepper Potts. Steve is genuinely moved and begins to consider Tony's offer. He's more persuaded by Tony's talk of taking things easy on Bucky than by anything else, but he's honestly thinking it over when Tony drops that Wanda is wrapped up in this as well. Steve immediately bristles. How can Tony be detaining her when she's done nothing wrong? Tony tries to dodge, but Steve is angry, relentless, batting away Tony's excuses until he loses his patience.
She's a kid! Give me a break!
Tony yells back, finally goaded into making the argument he's made since Age of Ultron.
I'm doing what has to be done to stave off something worse.
Bitterly, Steve tells him that he's deluding himself and refuses Tony's peace offering. Captain America will become a criminal rather than sign himself over to an institution he perceived as unjust. It's a magnificent clash of contradictions. Tony is a free man, but vulnerable, desperate. Steve is a prisoner, but he is free of any doubt or hesitation. Tony believes he's doing what he must, and he's haunted by it. Steve believes he's doing the same thing, and it's only making him stronger. The scene is great in and of itself. We could talk about how, when Steve begins to be moved by Tony's argument, he physically moves across the space for the first time, Tony's gift in hand. We could talk about how they physically switch positions in the room, with Tony going from standing to seated and Steve rising out of the chair as he gains the moral high ground. We could talk about the incredible performance that Robert Downey Jr. gives here, imbuing Tony with the desperate need to secure not only his friend's safety, but also his hero's approval, knowing that he's doing his best, but somehow his best isn't good enough. But all of that is in service to the moral conflict taking place between the two men. The argument between Tony and Steve's evident upper hand, is the message that the Russo brothers have devoted 4 of the biggest movies in the most epic pop culture franchise in history to conveying. And it's one marvelous scene. Steve's moral system is what we would refer to as deontology, morality derived from duty. It begins with base moral duties that should be applied universally, and deems an act moral if the actor is acting in accordance with his or her duty. There are a million wrinkles, but what you need to know about Steve Rogers is that he believes he serves moral principles that are bedrock and utterly inflexible. He doesn't always live up to them, but when he is acting in accordance with his principles, he has no hesitation. Why should he? They never change, and he never has to give them a second thought. Tony is a realist. Like Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D., he believes in
the world as it is, not as we'd like it to be.
Rather than approaching morality from the top down, from lofty principles that must be applied to the weeds of daily life, he looks at the consequences of an act, a morality referred to as consequentialism. For Tony, there is no one right answer that applies in every circumstance. Instead, the morality of an act must be judged on its intended outcome. He accepts that sometimes the world forces you to make ugly choices, like choosing between killing an entire city or an entire planet. And he doesn't run from those choices. Whichever choice is the least bad is the morally correct one. Each of these philosophies has its strengths and weaknesses. In Joss Whedon's Age of Ultron, we saw Steve paralyzed in Sokovia, unable to decide between dooming the city or letting it kill the planet when it fell. He and Tony were spared conflict by the arrival of Nick Fury, giving Steve a way to avoid making the choice.
Fury, you son of a bitch.
The Russo brothers aren't going to let him off the hook so easily. Since they've made their directorial debut in the MCU with Winter Soldier, they've been testing Steve's commitment to his deontological morals. In that film, Steve faced off against Nick Fury, who favors a system of control designed to keep people safe, but Steve objects that
this isn't freedom. This is fear.
He opposes Project Insight on principle, regardless of its possible outcomes, long before he learns that it's actually a reincarnation of his World War II nemesis organization, Hydra. And through this movie, the Russos argue that Steve is right. The destruction of Project Insight and then the dismantling of S.H.I.E.L.D. are both portrayed without negative consequences. Steve followed his morals, and they led to only good outcomes. There's no significant challenge to Steve's morality, since Hydra is clearly evil. Then we get to Civil War. The Russos have realized that they lost an opportunity to make Steve ask the really hard questions by making Hydra such an obviously villainous antagonist. Now, Steve has to test his morals against a friend, the invincible Iron Man. This time, the treatment is more nuanced. The sympathy of the movie is clearly with Steve, but we also see that he betrays his principles and his friendship with Tony to remain loyal to Bucky.
He's my friend. So was I.
Steve even admits wrongdoing in his letter to Tony, but even in accepting that he was wrong, he's not moving toward consequentialism. Instead, he accepts only that he has failed to meet his own deontological ideals. The negative consequences to his life stem from him not living up to his own morality, instead of being signs that his morality is flawed. In Infinity War, Steve barely interacts with Thanos, and presents no challenge to the villain's consequentialist morality. Instead, his foil is the Vision, another consequentialist. Vision argues that he must sacrifice himself in order to prevent Thanos from killing trillions, but Steve shakes his head.
We don't trade lives, Vision.
One life should be of value, even weighed against trillions of lives, because the choice itself is false, presenting two immoral outcomes. There's no more wrong in deontology. It's wrong to kill Vision, and it's wrong to kill trillions of people. Like in Sokovia, Steve can't allow himself to have to choose between a sure victory through destroying Vision and the possibility that failure leads to the snap. And they lose. The great morals of Captain America have led to disaster. Steve's morality was right in Winter Soldier. His ability to adhere to it was found wanting in Civil War, and in Infinity War, it wasn't able to prevent the end of the world. What does Endgame have to say about morality? I don't know yet, but it's for damn sure that the Russos have thought deeply about what their magnum opus has to tell us about what it means not just to be a hero, but to be human. Marvel movies catch a lot of shit for being shallow popcorn flicks, but the Russo brothers aren't content with mere spectacle. They've got a message they've been building to, and we're in the endgame now. Why does it matter? We've had a long discussion of the philosophical underpinnings of the Russos' MCU filmography, but so what? Who cares about philosophy? We didn't show up to these films because they were going to get deep. We showed up because we love these characters and want to see them beat the snot out of one another. I don't know. I guess I think it's important that the central theme of the biggest movies of all time is how to be a good person. I think that makes a difference. Maybe it's a little old-fashioned, but I think that among the billions of dollars and millions of fans, there have to be people who walk away from the theater thinking, what would Captain America do?
Everything that's happening, people might just need a little old-fashioned.
Whatever the outcome of Endgame, I thank the Russos for making movies that matter. Gods can thunder, and billionaire genius playboy philanthropists can fly, but these two brothers can show us how to live. And that's truly marvelous.